I came home on a Thursday evening, later than expected, the kind of tired that sits heavy in your bones. The trip hadn't been long, just a quick run downstate for a couple meetings, a night in a motel that smelled like mildew, and 100 miles of quiet highways. Nothing remarkable. But the house felt different the second I walked through the door. It wasn't obvious at first. Just something. You know how a place has a rhythm even in silence? Ours did. Or used to. But that night, something about the air felt out of sync. Too still. Like it had been holding its breath until I walked in. I dropped my duffel by the hall table and reached for the light switch. That's when I saw it. A shirt. Hanging neatly on the coat rack beside my jacket. Only it wasn't mine. It was a men's dress shirt, deep navy blue, tailored, the fabric clearly expensive. A little too crisp for everyday wear. It didn't belong to me. I don't even own anything in that shade. I stared at it, at first trying to make it make sense. Did I leave it here by mistake? Did I pick it up at the cleaners by accident? But no, this wasn't mine. I'd never worn anything that precise. That calculated. I stepped closer, and that's when I smelled it. Cologne. Strong, expensive, foreign. The kind of scent you don't forget after one whiff. It hit me like a wave, sharp citrus on top, smoky leather underneath. Definitely not mine. Definitely not some casual mistake. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The way it sat there, deliberately hung on a rack, said enough. It wasn't tossed carelessly. It hadn't fallen. It had been placed. Positioned. Like it belonged here now. That's when I heard her. Amy's voice floated in from the living room. Casual, light? Is that you? I swallowed the knot in my throat and walked in. She was curled up on the couch with a glass of red wine, her legs tucked under a cream-colored throw. The TV was on low, some cooking show humming in the background, and there was an untouched charcuterie board on the coffee table. Candles flickered on the mantel, casting soft shadows on the walls. It looked staged. Cozy. Intentional. Hey, she said, smiling. You're home early. Everything go okay? I nodded, eyes on her. Yeah. Traffic wasn't bad. She gestured to the wine. Want a glass? I ignored the question. Whose shirt is that in the hallway? Amy didn't flinch. She glanced back toward the front door, then shrugged with practiced ease. Oh, that? It's Josh's. He stopped by this afternoon. Said he was returning your drill and then realized he was late for something, some work dinner, I think. Changed shirts in the downstairs bathroom and must have left that one. Her tone was smooth. Too smooth. Like someone reading lines she'd practiced. She took another sip of her wine, as never leaving mine. Josh? I asked. From next door? Yeah. She nodded, crossing her legs. He's always borrowing tools from you. I figured you knew. I didn't respond right away. My mind was turning, slow and reluctant. Josh had never borrowed anything from me. We'd exchanged small talk maybe a dozen times in 3 years. Mostly about trash day or lawn care. I couldn't remember him ever stepping inside our house. Not once. Huh, I said, still standing. Weird thing to leave behind. Yeah, she replied too brightly. He texted about it later. I told him I'd bring it over tomorrow. I looked at her. Really looked. Her hair was styled in soft curls, makeup subtle but intentional. She was dressed like she'd gone out, not for errands or groceries, but for something that mattered. A loose silk blouse I hadn't seen before, paired with slim, black pants and gold hoops that shimmered when she turned her head. She looked beautiful. Too beautiful for a night in alone. Dinner plans? I asked, my voice quieter now. She tilted her head. No. Just wanted to treat myself a little. Long week, you know? I nodded slowly, then walked to the kitchen without another word. I poured myself some water, gripped the counter tighter than I meant to, and stared out the window over the sink. Nothing about this felt right. Not the shirt. Not her answers. Not the way she shifted so smoothly from lie to comfort. And I knew. I didn't want to admit it, not yet, but I knew. This wasn't just forgetfulness. This wasn't an honest mistake. This was a trace. A fingerprint. A mark left behind by someone who didn't belong here. I went back to the living room and sat down across from her, not next to her. The space between us stretched wide. She turned the volume up slightly, pretending not to notice. Her wine glass clinked softly when she set it down. I watched her closely. What did you guys talk about? I asked, feigning curiosity. She blinked. Who? Josh. Oh, she said, shrugging. Nothing really. Just house stuff. He mentioned your grill cover was flapping in the wind the other day. He stayed long enough to notice that? She laughed lightly. He's nosy, you know that. I nodded again. But here's the thing. The grill is behind a tall privacy fence. You can't see it unless you're inside the yard. Or the kitchen. and Josh had never been inside. I didn't push. Not yet. Something inside me told me not to. There's this strange thing that happens when suspicion blooms in your chest. You start collecting moments like evidence. Every glance, every offhand comment, every pause in a sentence becomes a piece of something bigger. A picture you don't want to see but can't stop assembling. I went upstairs not long after that. Told her I was beat and had an early morning. She nodded, unfazed. Kissed me on the cheek without really looking at me. In our bedroom, I stood by the window, staring out into the night. The wind rustled the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Couldn't sleep. The scent of that shirt had followed me, ghosting through the house like a warning. That cologne, foreign, bold, unmistakably masculine, still clung to my senses. I kept thinking about how deliberately it had been placed, how Amy had let it stay there, visible, without flinching, as if daring me to ask. I opened our closet, scanning her side. A few new pieces hung among the usual clothes, flashier, trendier, not her usual style. I hadn't noticed them before, or maybe I had and just told myself they didn't mean anything. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time that night, replaying the moment I walked through the door. The shirt, the smell, the practiced ease in her voice. It had all happened so fast, just a few seconds, but I couldn't stop rerunning it. And then something inside me shifted. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. But something cracked, quiet and deep. I realized I didn't trust her answer. I didn't believe a word of it. And the moment that thought formed, everything between us changed. Amy was in the next room, humming along to some commercial on the TV. She had no idea. But I was already gone. Not physically. Not yet. But something in me had started walking away. That night, after the shirt, after the scent, after Amy's carefully wrapped lie was handed to me with a smile, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me. Her back turned, breathing even, like none of it had happened. Like I hadn't come home to the ghost of another man lingering in our house. The scent still clung to the edges of the hallway like an accusation. I turned onto my side and watched the curve of her spine under the blanket. She used to sleep curled into me, her fingers finding mine without a word. Now it was like she needed the space, as if touching me was too much effort or maybe just too foreign. And yet, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it really was Josh's shirt. Maybe I was overthinking. I tried to believe it, to force belief like someone preying on autopilot, needing comfort more than truth. But the dam was cracked now. The water was already rushing in. That night, I started counting all the things I had ignored. Like her phone. 6 months ago, it used to sit on the kitchen counter while she cooked, screen up, always dinging with messages from her sister, her friends, her work group chat. Now it was always in her hand or face down, locked with a passcode I didn't know. She used to chuckle when I grabbed it to skip a song or read a text out loud. Now, even when I glanced toward it, her body stiffened, a hand casually gliding over it like she was just moving it closer to her. But not really. It was guarded, like she was hiding something, or someone. And then the calls. Short whispers, muffled laughs behind closed doors. She claimed it was work, late projects, end-of-quarter chaos. But I knew better. I knew her voice when she talked to someone she liked. It became lighter, warmer. It didn't sound like spreadsheets and team meetings. It sounded like flirting. It sounded like secrets. Then there were the gym sessions. Amy had always hated the gym. She once joked that the only weight she lifted was her wine glass. But about 3 months ago, she joined a boutique fitness club downtown. Bar, yoga, Pilates. All the things she once mocked as sweaty Instagram nonsense. She started going 3-4 times a week. Her gear was new, pricey. Lululemon tags and sleek water bottles. A new bag she never let me carry. She said it was about taking care of herself, finally prioritizing her health. I wanted to believe that. I tried to. But she never looked sore. Never tired. She came back glowing, energized, even like she just stepped off a movie set instead of a treadmill. And there were the clothes. At first, it was subtle. A new lipstick shade. Different earrings. A shorter haircut she didn't tell me about until I noticed. Then dresses. Tight. Sharp. Things she used to leave on the rack. Now arriving in boxes from upscale brands. She'd twirl in front of the mirror and say it was just about feeling confident. For herself. But it wasn't me she dressed up for. And I knew it. One night, about a month before the shirt, we were getting ready for dinner with her old college friend, Harper. Amy stood in front of the mirror, adjusting a slim-fitting dress that dipped lower than anything she'd ever worn. I watched from the doorway, waiting to see if she'd ask my opinion like she used to. She didn't. Instead, she turned, gave me a glance, and said, "Do I look okay?" "You look amazing," I replied, meaning it. But she didn't really hear me. She had already turned back to the mirror, eyes scanning herself, not me. I didn't say anything then. I told myself I was being sensitive. But I was noticing. I just didn't want to admit what I saw. Then came the nights she worked late. She always made a point to mention them during breakfast, casually while scrolling her phone. "Oh, by the way, I'll be working late tonight. Don't wait up." She'd say it with a shrug, like it was normal, like I wouldn't question it. And I didn't. Not at first. But when late nights became late weekends and late weekends turned into full Saturdays away, catching up on deadlines, my stomach started to twist. She never offered details. Never talked about the projects or the clients. Just vague lines like, "You wouldn't be interested," or "It's all boring admin stuff." I started offering to bring her dinner, stop by her office. Every time she'd decline, politely at first, then more firmly. "It's too hectic," she said once. "I'd rather just focus and not worry about entertaining." Entertaining. That was her word for it. Entertaining her husband. The final straw, the thing that should have been the loudest alarm, happened 2 weeks before the shirt. We were out grocery shopping. She was a few steps ahead of me in the produce aisle when her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, read the screen, then, without opening the message, deleted it. Just like that. Thumb flick, gone. I didn't say anything, but I watched the way her jaw tightened. I saw the way her fingers hesitated for a split second too long over the screen before she shoved it into her purse. I asked casually, "Everything okay?" She turned and smiled. "Yeah, just spam." But her voice had that edge, that soft tremor you hear when someone's bluffing but hopes you won't call them on it. I wanted to ask more. I didn't. Instead, I nodded and reached for a bunch of bananas I didn't need. Looking back, I can see how every moment was leading to that shirt. It wasn't just a shirt. It was confirmation. A physical, undeniable marker that all the half-truths and inconsistencies were adding up to something solid. I thought about all the times she came to bed after me later and later these days, thinking I was asleep. She used to brush my shoulder or whisper goodnight. Lately, she just slipped in, turning off the light before I could see her face. Or how she'd get dressed in the bathroom now, not the bedroom, claiming she didn't want to wake me with the light. But really, I think she didn't want me to see what she was wearing. Or who she was dressing for. She was leaving me before she left me. Emotionally. Mentally. She was already gone. And the truth is, I saw it. I just wasn't ready to believe it. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always arrive with screaming or confessions. Sometimes it sneaks in quietly, wearing familiar faces and familiar routines. And we, the ones being betrayed, we help it. We smooth its path. We hand it our trust and look the other way. Because facing the truth means giving up the version of the person we thought we knew. And I wasn't ready to let go of that version of Amy. Not yet. But I felt it. In my gut. In the way her laugh no longer reached her eyes. In the way our home felt colder, quieter, like a museum of a marriage that once was. So I watched. And I waited. Because if she was lying to me and I was starting to believe she was, I wanted to be sure. I wanted to see it for myself. I didn't want to catch her in a story. I wanted to catch her in the act. The following night, I drove downtown. I didn't tell Amy I was going out. She thought I had a work call, some late-night conference I made up on the spot while she was half distracted with whatever new show she had started binging. She barely looked up when I said it. Just nodded, muttered good luck, and went back to scrolling. It used to bother me when she didn't care what I was up to. Now, I was grateful. I took the long way through the city, crawling block by block as the sun dipped behind the buildings and the sky turned slate gray. My hands were cold on the steering wheel, but I didn't dare turn the heat on. I needed to feel something. Even if it was just the chill. I didn't have a plan. I only had a name, Hotel Wilder. She'd said it once, in passing, a few weeks back when I asked about a phone call she took in the kitchen. It was just work stuff. Melissa's team is doing a launch event at Hotel Wilder next month. Super fancy. She wanted my opinion on the layout. And then she laughed and poured another glass of wine. Like it meant nothing. But I remembered the way she said the name. Too specific. Too pointed. Like it was planted. And it stuck with me. So that's where I went. Hotel Wilder sat on the corner of 9th and Pine. An old red brick building with black steel balconies and oversized windows. It was the kind of place where the lobby smelled like money. Subtle florals and leather-bound ledgers. Classy. Int asterisk mate. Discreet. I parked across the street in a shadowed spot where the lights from the nearby cafe flickered just enough for me to see the entrance without being seen. My car idled for a few minutes before I led the engine. Then I sat in the dark and waited. An hour passed. Nothing. The world kept moving. Cabs pulling in and out, valet boys hustling with keys, a couple walking a golden retriever in matching sweaters. I watched it all. I watched the revolving door spin, over and over, wondering if I was crazy, if I was imagining everything, if I had built a case out of smoke and suspicion. And then I saw her, Amy. She appeared from the far end of the sidewalk, walking slowly, head down, her fingers laced with someone else's. A man. Tall, clean-cut, charcoal gray coat, tailored to fit like a second skin. His hand rested comfortably on her back, just above her waist, the way someone does when they're used to touching you. Not tentative, not curious, familiar. They stopped just outside the hotel doors. He said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed. Really laughed. I hadn't heard that sound in months. It wasn't her polite chuckle or the forced laugh she gave me when I made a joke. This was different, looser, happier. She looked at him like she wanted to kiss him. And then she did. Right there on the sidewalk, under the amber glow of the streetlights, she leaned in and kissed him. Not quick, not stolen, not guilty. A kiss with weight, with comfort. And he kissed her back. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. Not out of rage, not then. It wasn't even shock. It was confirmation. Cold, calm, surgical confirmation that the thing I'd been fearing, suspecting, unraveling in my mind for weeks was real. Amy was having an affair, and I was watching it unfold like a scene in a play. They disappeared through the doors, the bellman tipping his hat, oblivious to the scene he'd just welcomed in. And just like that, they were inside. I didn't move, couldn't. I sat there, staring at the empty sidewalk, heart pounding so hard it made my vision blur. The kind of pounding that doesn't come from panic, but from something deeper, from truth. From heartbreak settling in your chest like cement. Minutes passed, maybe more. Part of me wanted to follow them, to barge in, to storm the front desk and demand to know what room they were in, to pull open doors until I found them together and saw it with my own eyes. But I didn't, because I had seen enough. Her fingers in his, her laugh, that kiss, told me everything I needed to know. And suddenly all the little signs snapped into place. The late nights, the gym clothes, the locked phone, the shirt on the rack. They weren't coincidences. They weren't paranoia. They were a trail she'd been leaving, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, hoping I'd stay too blind or too tired to follow. But I had followed. And now I stood at the edge of the truth. I thought about calling someone, a friend, my brother, anyone. But what would I say? She kissed another man. And now I don't know what my life is anymore. No, this wasn't a moment for sharing. This was a moment for knowing. Quietly, completely. So I sat back in the seat, staring at the hotel, letting the silence settle around me. I thought about the version of Amy I used to know. The woman who once waited up for me with takeout and bad movies queued on Netflix, who wore my college hoodie around the house just because it smelled like me, who whispered, "I love you," like it was a secret only we shared. That woman was gone. Maybe she had been gone longer than I realized. Maybe I had held on to a memory long after she had let go of me. When they didn't come out after an hour, I started the car and drove away. Not fast, not in a rage, just away. I didn't go home. I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove. Through streets we used to walk together, past restaurants where we'd celebrated anniversaries, under the same lights that had once seemed romantic. Now they just felt harsh. Eventually, I parked outside a convenience store on the edge of town. I sat there in the glow of fluorescent signage, trying to figure out what came next. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the dashboard like some movie cliché. Instead, I sat still, listening to the sound of my own breathing, waiting for the panic to come. It didn't. What came was something heavier. Resignation. This wasn't a moment of sudden ruin. It was the final piece clicking into place after months of slow collapse. Amy had made her choice. And now I had to make mine. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence. Not just from Amy, from me too. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask where she had been that night. I didn't bring up the hotel or the man or the kiss that had burned itself into my memory like a scar I couldn't cover. I just watched her. She moved through the house like nothing had changed. Made coffee in the morning, hummed while brushing her hair, asked me once if I could take the trash out before Thursday. Her casualness almost convinced me I'd imagined everything. Almost. But underneath her smile there was something sharper now. A kind of carelessness. Like the role of wife was becoming an old costume she no longer needed to wear with precision. She stopped pretending. That's what hurt more than anything. And then came the dinner. I hadn't planned on going. It was a corporate thing, a client of ours throwing a formal dinner to thank the firms who'd helped on a big contract. I'd contributed a few consulting hours. Amy encouraged me to attend, said it would look good. I almost laughed when she said that. Look good to who? Still, I went. I think I needed to see what would happen. Some part of me wanted to know just how far she'd go. Maybe I was hoping to be wrong. Maybe I wanted to see her look guilty. Ashamed. But that's not what I saw. What I saw was worse. The event was held in the banquet hall of a downtown hotel, not the same one, but similar enough that the decor made my skin crawl. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, floral centerpieces that smelled too sweet. I arrived a little late. Amy was already there. She stood at a round table near the bar, surrounded by a group of people, laughing, her hand resting lightly on a man's arm. Him. The man from Hotel Wilder. I hadn't known his name until that night, but there he was, standing inches from my wife, telling a story with that same smooth, charming tone I'd heard once from the driver's seat of my car. Everyone around him was hanging on his words. And Amy? She looked proud. She spotted me a second later, and for the first time in weeks, her smile faltered. Just for a moment. A flicker. Then it was back. She excused herself from the circle and walked over, wine in hand. Hey, she said lightly, as if we were bumping into each other at the grocery store. Didn't think you'd come? I said I might. She nodded, looking down at her glass like she was checking for something. You look good, she added. You're here with him? I asked. Her smile thinned. It's not like that. I saw you. She blinked. Tom, can we not do this here? It's not the place. She was right. It wasn't. But I wasn't sure there'd ever be a place again where anything between us felt safe. I walked past her, heading for the drinks table, trying to steady myself. A waiter offered me champagne. I took a scotch. Strong, neat. I needed the burn. The night rolled forward. Speeches. Toasts. Polite laughter. I kept my distance, orbiting the room like a satellite that didn't belong. I kept my eyes on them. On Amy. On him. His name was Stephen. I overheard someone say it. Apparently he was an executive at one of the partner companies. Charismatic. Well-connected. The kind of guy who leaned too close when he spoke and had a resume full of empty buzzwords. And then it happened. I was standing near the dessert table, trying to look busy, when I heard Stephen's voice rise over the hum of the crowd. He was telling a story, a joke, really about some consultant who thought he knew more than he did. He didn't say my name, but the timing was obvious. His eyes flicked toward me once. Just once. Amy laughed. Not politely. Not awkwardly. She laughed like it was funny. Like she was entertained. That was the moment it shifted. They weren't hiding anymore. They weren't even trying. This wasn't some secret affair behind closed doors. This was public. This was a performance. I wasn't a husband betrayed in private. I was the punchline of a shared joke. Stephen raised his glass toward me at the end of the story. No hard feelings, right? He called out, a smirk on his lips. The room fell quiet. Not silent. Just less loud. A hush that spread like fog. A few heads turned. Amy didn't stop him. Didn't scold him. She didn't even look at me. She took a sip of wine and stared into the distance like none of this concerned her. I felt something in me go cold. It wasn't rage. I thought that would come, but it didn't. It was humiliation. Pure, uncut, soul-stinging humiliation. I set my glass down. It shook slightly. I walked out of the room. I didn't look back. Outside, the city air slapped me awake. Cold and sharp and honest. I stood there for a long time, watching cars pass, people walking by, all living lives I envied in that moment. Lives untouched by this kind of betrayal. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Instead, I drove with no destination, just roads and turns and silence. I ended up in front of an old friend's house, Ben, someone I hadn't talked to in months. I texted him from the driveway. One word, you home. The door opened a minute later. No questions. No judgment. Just a place to be. I stayed in his spare room that night. Slept in a bed that smelled like laundry detergent and old books. It felt safer than my own house. Amy didn't call. Didn't text. She knew. Or maybe she didn't care. In the quiet, I kept replaying the moment, Stephen's voice, the smirk, the laughter, the way Amy looked away like she'd already erased me. This wasn't just an affair. It was erasure. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd made me the fool. They'd done it with wine in hand and smiles on their faces in a room full of people who either didn't notice or chose not to. It wasn't just about being cheated on anymore. It was about being made into a story neither of them were ashamed to tell out loud. I didn't go home the next day. Or the day after that. Ben didn't ask questions. That's the kind of friend he was. He just handed me a spare key, pointed to the Wi-Fi password on a sticky note, and let me be. The spare room was small, the bed a bit too firm, but it was quiet. There was no perfume in the sheets, no wine glasses left on end tables, no soft footfalls in the hall reminding me who I used to be. It was the first place I'd breathed in weeks. I didn't answer Amy's texts. She only sent 3. The first was short, "Can we talk?" As if what had happened at the dinner was something that could be ironed out over coffee. The second came the next morning, "Please don't ignore me." I didn't want it to happen that way. That was when I turned off read receipts. The third came 2 days later. A photo of our cat, Bean, curled up on the windowsill. No words. Just that image, as if nostalgia could patch a bleeding artery. I didn't respond to that one either. Instead, I sat in the backyard of Ben's house, wrapped in a borrowed hoodie, staring at the oak tree that leaned crooked over the fence. He had a small fire pit rusted at the edges. Most nights I sat out there long after the sky went black, watching the embers glow and cool, smoke curling like the thoughts I couldn't put into words. In those quiet nights, the fog in my brain started to lift. I began seeing things for what they were, not just Amy's betrayal, but the long, slow unraveling that had come before it. The truth was, she had been leaving me long before that kiss on the hotel steps. Before the shirt on the coat rack. Even before the locked phone and the gym memberships and the perfume I didn't recognize. She had started pulling away piece by piece, detaching herself from our life like someone packing silently before a storm. I remembered how she used to leave the light on when I was running late. That stopped around spring. I remembered how she used to send me photos during the day, little things, her lunch, Bean doing something stupid, a quote from a book she liked. That stopped in July. I remembered how we used to fall asleep tangled together. Then it became back to back. Then separate blankets. Then the door quietly closing between us. She didn't stop loving me overnight. But she did stop. And maybe I stopped too, not in feeling, but in noticing. I kept showing up to a marriage that was already empty, thinking if I smiled enough or fixed the broken drawer or brought home the good wine, I could anchor her to us. But she was already drifting. Now that I was away from her, from that house, from her voice, her presence, I could see it clearly. Every memory rewrote itself in sharper lines. Every moment that had felt small at the time now screamed with implication. She was done before she told me. She just didn't have the courage to say it. I started packing up pieces of myself. Not literally, not yet, but mentally. Emotionally. I drew invisible lines in the sand and began untangling my life from hers. The first thing I did was stop looking at our photos. I'd open my phone out of habit, scroll through old memories, a trip to the lake, birthdays, blurry selfies in the kitchen, and each one felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone I didn't recognize anymore. So I stopped. I archived the album. I told myself I could always look again later, but I knew I wouldn't. Those weren't souvenirs. They were ghosts. The next thing I did was change my mailing address. Ben helped me set up a temporary P.O. box. It felt stupid at first, like a pointless formality, but when I saw the first envelope arrive with just my name on it, no hers, it hit me harder than I expected. It was the first thing in months that belonged entirely to me. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not my parents. Not even my sister, who always had a sixth sense for when something was wrong. I wasn't ready for the questions, the condolences, the awkward silences on the other end of the phone, because despite everything, part of me still felt like I had failed. I knew I hadn't caused her affair. I wasn't naive enough to shoulder that blame, But I'd been there when the distance grew. I'd watched it happen. And I didn't stop it. I think the worst part was knowing that I still missed her. Not her now. Not the Amy who laughed at Steven's jokes and kissed him in public like I didn't exist. I missed the Amy who snuck Kit Kats into my briefcase before long meetings. The Amy who cried during car commercials. The Amy who once woke me up at 3 a.m. just to tell me she had a dream we bought a dog and named it Pancake. That version of her was still stitched into me like muscle memory. I couldn't unlove her all at once. But I could stop feeding the fantasy. And that's what I did next. I went back to the house. Not to see her. I timed it so she'd be at work, or with him, wherever she spent her hours now. I just needed to get my things, the things that still held meaning, the things that didn't remind me of her. Ben offered to come with me. I said no. I needed to face it alone. The moment I stepped through the door, it hit me. The weight of a space that no longer belonged to me. It looked the same, smelled the same, but everything about it felt foreign. Like I was trespassing in a life I used to own. I moved quickly. I took my clothes, the ones she hadn't folded. My tools from the garage. A few books from the office. My watch, the one my grandfather left me. I left everything else. I didn't want it. Not the matching mugs, not the photos on the mantle, not the throw blanket we picked out at that ridiculous artisan market 2 years ago. And not the ring. It was still in the dish by the sink, where I'd left it after the dinner. I didn't touch it, but I did take her things. Every last one of them. I packed up the closet. The shoes. The makeup in the bathroom. The notebooks on the desk, the lotions by the tub. Even the chipped mug she swore made coffee taste better. I put them all in a box. Then another. Then a third. I left them in the garage, neatly stacked, labeled in black marker. Amy. She could come get them whenever she wanted. When I walked out of that house, I didn't look back. I locked the door, slid the key into the mailbox, and drove away without turning the radio on. It was done. The threads were cut. Not in anger, not in fire, but with clarity. I wasn't running. I wasn't mourning. I was removing the poison. And for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe.